Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Yud Amud Aleph, starting with 14 lines from the top on the Amud. The Gemara is discussing the positioning of a lechi and stated that in regards to a lechi that is visible from the inside but cannot be visible from the outside. In other words, what's called that it's nire mi bifnim v'shava mi bachutz. From the inside, a person stands inside the mavui, he can see that it's the beginning of a fourth wall. However, from the outside, it runs flush to the mavui's wall, and therefore, it does not look like it's the beginning of a fourth wall, rather, just the thickness of the mavui wall itself. On that, the Gemara states that everybody agrees that that's a valid lechi. What about the opposite scenario? If you have a lechi that is visible from the outside, but from the inside is not visible. So there, if you have the walls of the mavui, and the lechi is towards the outer part of the mavui wall, so from the outside, it's jutted in a place where it looks like the beginning of the fourth wall, whereas from the inside, you wouldn't see it as the beginning of the fourth wall, maybe just the thickness of the mavui wall. So there's a machlekes. Included in those who say that it is indeed a good lechi is the son of Rav Huna, Rabba bar Rav Huna. The Gemara now states over here as follows: Omar Rabbi Yosef, lo shmiya li ha de shmaitza. Rav Yosef says, I did not hear this shmaitza, this halacha, that a mavui that is visible from the outside, but is flush from the inside, is considered to be a lechi. I did not hear that from Rav Huna. Omar le Abaye, at amris nihilon. Abaye says to him, you did teach us this in the name of Rav Huna. In other words, we find in different places in Shas that Rav Yosef, at a certain point, he became ill and he forgot much of his learning. So we find that his Talmid Abaye corrects him and says that you did teach us certain things. Similarly over here, Abaye then tells him that you did teach us the following teaching in the name of Rav Huna. And is this that you taught us? That you said that Rami Bar Chamo said in the name of Rav Huna, if you have a lechi that runs with the wall of a mavui, you have a lechi that is again going and extending through the wall of the mavui. In other words, the mavui's walls are a certain thickness, let's say an amma, or let's say a tefach rather, and you have the lechi that is, let's say, a half of an tefach and continues straight further down beyond the entrance to the mavui. So on there we're saying if it's less than dalid tfachim, less than dalid amos, then that extended mavui wall, which is the lechi, half the size, is thinner than the mavui wall. There, he says, it's less than dalid tfachim. The din is as follows: nido mishum lechi. Then we consider it to be like a lechi. Umishtamish im chudoy hapnimi. And you can use then the inner part of the corner of that lechi as then being the part where you can begin then being mishtamish in the mavui. You can go ahead and begin carrying in that mavui. However, if it's dalid amos, if this extended wall of the mavui, which is thinner than the mavui wall, what we're calling over here this hemshech, and this is dalid amos or more, then is no longer considered to be the din of a lechi. So from here, says Abaye to Rav Yosef, Va'at amris lon Allah, and you had stated in regards to this, Shma mina tlas, we can then conclude three different halachos. Shma mina bein lechion aser. The first halacha is that between the lechi, opposite keneged the lechi itself, you cannot be mishtamish. It's only from the chudoy mi bifnim. But keneged the lechi, that you cannot go ahead and use. The second halacha you taught us is Shmamina Meshech Mavui Ba'arba, that if you have the continuation of a lechi of Arba Amos, then it has a Hechshir Mavui. It's considered to be a wall of a Mavui. It no longer has the status of a lechi, it has the status of a wall of a Mavui. And therefore you made the distinction that only if it's less than Arba Amos can be considered to be a lechi, but if it's Arba Amos or more, then it loses its status as a lechi and it becomes now a wall of a Mavui. And the third halacha that you concluded is as follows. Ushmamina nira mi bachutz v'shava mibifnim nido mishum lechi. If you see the lechi only that is visible from the outside, but from the inside it's flush, then you still consider it to be a viable lechi. So indeed we see that he concluded that the positioning of a lechi that is nira mi bachutz v'shava mibifnim is considered to be a good lechi. Ad Kan, what Abai explained and reminded his teacher Rav Yosef, who heard this in the name of Rav Huna. Says the Gemara now, V'hilchasa nira mi bachutz v'sham mibifnim nidoy mishum lechi. And the halacha is indeed the way we were just recorded, that the lechi that can only be visibly seen from the outside but is flush from the inside would be a viable lechi. Ask the Gemara, Tiyufta v'hilchasa, there was a refutation on this halacha that was stated earlier on the Amud, and stated that such a lechi that is only visible from the outside is not a viable lechi. And yet you're concluding over here that it is? Gemara answers in Mishum detani Rabbi Chia kavasei, because Rabbi Chia, in addition to Rav Huna, who said that this is the halacha, in addition to that which Rav Yosef had said in the name of Rav Huna that this is the halacha, but Rav Chia had brought a brisa that supported him. And although there was another brisa that seems to be contrary to this, but this brisa that Rav Chia brought, we're saying is authoritative, and therefore the halacha is that if a lechi is going to be only visible from the outside and is flush from one who is sitting in the inside, cannot see it as a lechi, that's still going to be a viable lechi. The Gemara now brings a quotation from our Mishnah, V'harachav me'eser yimat. If the entranceway of a mavui, the entranceway is wider than Arba Amos, then it's no longer considered to be a Pesach. And therefore one has to be memayet the wideness of this space of the entrance. Omar Abaye stated, Tana, it says in the following brisa, V'harachav me'eser yimat, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Eino Tzorich L'mayit. The brisa adds that the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that he's arguing also not only on the height of the entranceway, but he's also arguing on the width. And he says over here, again, Lakula, that here it does not have to be Eser Amos only wide, it can even be wider. Ask the Gemara Ve'ad Kama, how wide could it be according to Rabbi Yehuda? Sova Rav Achai Kamed Rav Yosef L'meimar Ad Sholosh Esrei Amo V'shlish. He said up until 13 and 1/3 amma wide. The kal vachomer mi pasei bereos, and it's a kal vachomer from the pasei bereos. Pasei bereos are when they had the ole regalim, and they would travel and stop in a certain place on Shabbos. In order to then draw water from the well, there was a problem because the well itself had the dimensions of a Rishus HaYochid, and they were situated in the Rishus HaRabim, so they could not draw water from the well into where they were. So the Chachamim said there's a special dispensation, a kula, for the Ole Regalim that made pasiriyos. Pasiriyos means that there was a L-shaped on 4 corners, each one being an amma in each direction, and it would enclose the be'er, and by these pasim, and thereby that would be sufficient to then include the whole area as a Rishus HaYochid. So even though over here you only have really 1 amma, and by 1 amma in each corner, and therefore you have a large space in between, nonetheless they were makil, and this is viable. However, the maximum space between the 2 corners was 13 and 1/3 amma. So Gemara wants to say that we can learn mavui as a kal vachomer from the pasei yiriyos. And therefore, if over there is 13 and 1/3 amma space, so too over here, you can have a mavui with the entrance up to 13 and 1/3 amma, as follows. V'kal v'chomer mipasi b'yireos. Uma pasi b'yireos shahitarta behen parutz meruba ala oimer, ama oimed. By pasi yireos, it allowed to have more open space than the wall itself. Because again, the wall itself was only 1 amma by 1 amma in each corner. So it really is only 1 amma plus another amma on the other side, whereby it's 2 ammos in its entirety as a closed wall, but in between there's 13 and 1/3 amma. And lo hirtarta bahen yoisim mishlosh amma v'shlish, and they only allowed a maximum of 13 and 1/3 amma. Mavui shelo hitarta by parutz meruba ala oimed. Eino din shelo hitatir by yoisim mishlosh amma v'shlish. By mavui, where they did not matir this parutz, that there should be more open space than wall, then certainly you should be able to have at least 13 and 1/3 amma. That's the kal v'chomer the Gemara is now bringing from Pasi Yireos, that we see over there. If it's 13 1/3 amma, then certainly that's at least the width of the mavui. Ask the Gemara v'yanar senes, but this itself is going to prove otherwise. Pasi b'Yireos shehitarta behen parutz meruba ala oimed lo tatir ben yoisim mishlosh esrei am v'shlish. By Pasi b'Yireos, there, because it has a special thing where it says that the open space is more than the closed space, therefore it can only have a maximum of 13 and 1/3 amma. But mavui shelo hitarta by parutz meruba ala oimed, whereas mavui does not matir open space more than the closed space. Fakir, you have to have more closed space than open space in regards to the wall. Then tatir boyosim yud gil amos v'shlish. Then you can have more than 13 and 1/3 amos. In other words, again, the Kal V'chomer was saying that we can learn mavui from Pasi b'Yireos that it's a width of only 13 and 1/3 amos. I want to correct what I said before. That's the maximum we can learn from Pasi Yireos, and therefore by mavui, that's what Rabbi Yehuda said. You can also have up to 13 and 1/3 amos on the entranceway to the mavui. Now the Gemara is now challenging this Kal V'chomer and saying the only reason why Pasi Yireos can have a maximum of 13 and 1/3 amo is because it has so much open space, more open space, parutz, than the oimed, than the closed space. But by mavui, which has the opposite, more closed space than the open space, there you could have more than 13 and 1/3 amo. Inami li'idach gisa. Alternatively, you'll go in the other direction, the other way. Pasi b'Yireos di akilas bihu chad kula. Pasi b'Yireos, which they were makil in akil bihu kula achrina. Once they were making Pasi Yireos, allowing such a formation of a wall which has much more open space than closed space, therefore they were also making and allowing 13 and 1/3 amos as a wall. But mavui, klal loy. But mavui that does not have such a kula, then you cannot go ahead and have such a large space beyond perhaps even the 10 amos. So therefore we cannot conclude anything from Pasi b'Yireos. And therefore we do not know how wide Rabbi Yehuda allows the entrance wall of a mavui to be. Says the Gemara, Vaiter Tani Levi. Levi taught the following. Again, in regards to the positioning of a lechi to allow tiltul in the mavui. Mavui shehu rachav asar esrim amma. If you have a mavui that has a width of the entranceway to be 20 amma, no eitz kana be'emtza isa v'daya. You can stick a pole in the middle of that entranceway, and that's sufficient. In other words, that pole will then divide the 20 amos, 10 amos, and 10 amos, and thereby you won't have more than 10 amos, whereby you can take a lechi and put it on one side, that will then validate the tiltul of mavui on that side of the pole, and on the other side of the pole, you'd have to put another lechi at the other end of the mavui wall to then permit a tiltul on the mavui of that side. Hutani law v'hu omar law de'ein halacha ka'oisem mishnah. However, Levi, who taught this, said that the halacha is not like this brisa, because after all, this is not going to be valid. The spaces on both sides will invalidate this pole that's in the middle trying to separate from the two sides of the mavui. There are those that say a different version. Omar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi, that Shmuel said in the name of Levi. Ein halacha ga'osim Mishnah. That Levi, Shmuel is saying, the halacha is not like that which was taught in the name of Levi. Elahechi Ovid. So how then do we then position the lechi in a 20 amos wide type of mavui? Omar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi. Shmuel then said in the name of Levi as follows. On top of Yud Amud Beis, Oise pas gavoya asora b'meshech arba amos uma'amidoy la'orka shel mavui. If you take a pas that is 10 tfachim high, the minimum height of a wall, and you put it a meshech of arba amos uma'amidoy la'arka shel mavui, and you stand it to the length of the mavui. In other words, you put it in the middle of this width of the entranceway to this mavui that's 20 amos wide. And instead of the pole being in the middle, but you take a pas that is 10 tfachim high and 4 amos long, and you put that inside the entranceway, then it says that that would be then a valid way of separating the two mavui, whereby you have then 10 amos and 10 amos. Again, you'd have to put a lechi on one end to validate the tiltul on that mavui, and then you have to put a separate lechi on the other end to validate the tiltul on that side of the mavui. Inami kid Rav Yehuda, alternative like that which Rav Yehuda stated. Do'om Rav Yehuda mavui shehu rachav chameshes amma. If you have a mavui that this time instead of being 20 amos wide, it's 15 amos wide of the entrance. Marchik shtei amos v'oise pas shalosh amos. You can distance a distancing of 2 amos from the end. Then you can make a pas of 3 amos. Again, the pas would be asar tfachim, and it would be 3 amos. And then you have a closure of 5 amos, whereby you're left with only an opening of eser amos. So that would be another way of validating. Again, you'd have to put a lechi, so then that lechi would be validating the tiltul inside this mavui. But this would be an alternative way to then matir tiltul in this mavui, even though it had the width of 15 amos. You now closed essentially 5 amos because you left an open space of 2. You then made a pas of 3 amos. And since the pas of 3 amos is bigger than the empty space of 2 amos, thereby it's a valid wall of 5 amos, whereby you now closed the entranceway to then only have a width of Yud amos.